Has to work quickly. Down to 6 seconds. Carr going down again. And it's Quentin Williams this time for the Jets.
Over the middle in the air, picked off. Brian Poole to the end zone, touchdown. The punter to beat, and the punter brings him down. Braden Mann saved a touchdown most likely.
Looks right, fires a bomb down the right sideline again for Mims. What a catch by Denzel Mims.
And welcome back to an episode of the Cool Your Jets podcast. We're here with Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. And boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about. An emergency podcast. Sam Darnold officially traded to the Carolina Panthers for a 6th-rounder this year and a 2nd and 4th next year. Michael, your initial thoughts?
This is definitely a lot better of a package than I expected the Jets to get. I think we talked about it recently. I think we expected them to get maybe a 3rd rounder is probably what we were expecting. It did seem like the value had probably gone down a little bit with a lot of suitors off the board, the draft getting closer. Some reports that the league might not be too high on Darnold. But this is a great package. Obviously, the 2nd doesn't come till next year, but to get a 2nd rounder in addition to a 4th and a 6th, and no conditions with any of those picks either, is definitely a lot more than I expected. And I think if you add up the value of all those picks on the trade charts, it equates to a mid to high 2nd rounder, about the 10th to 12th pick, somewhere in that range in the 2nd round. So like a high 2nd round pick altogether. So very good value, I think, more than what I expected them to get.
Yeah, I mean, we did a podcast over the weekend, which I'll edit together, I guess, to make it make sense. We did a mock draft, so it's still relevant. But the first part of that episode, we did talk a little bit about Darnold, and the proposed trade that I assumed that he was going to go for was a 3rd this year and then a 3rd next year that could be a conditional 2nd, depending on how well he played. So similar value, but I agree. I think Joe Douglas got a hell of a haul. I mean, multiple picks. I mean, the draft is a crapshoot, so as many lottery tickets as you can get, the higher chance that you're going to bring contributors to this team. I mean, obviously the 6th rounder this year probably won't be anything, but you never know. But the 2nd rounder next year is obviously premium value, and the 4th is still a solid pick, just depending on how the Panthers do. It's tough because, look, Sam was nothing short of an upstanding guy and teammate in this locker room. I mean, he was great for the city. He said all the right things. He did all the right things. He was a really easy guy to root for. And I feel bad for him because I don't really feel like this is all on him. I do feel like he's a better quarterback than what we saw last year. I do feel like the Jets did a poor job building around him, surrounding him with a competent head coach, a competent GM for the first year and a half of his career. So it's unfortunate. I do think, as Joe Douglas said, that his NFL story isn't written. But it made sense for both teams. And I'll say this, I think it's a win-win-win. I think it's a win for the Jets. They get the compensation that they were looking for. The Panthers were kind of in QB. They didn't really have any plan at QB because they probably aren't going to be able to trade with Atlanta and an interdivision trade to get a quarterback at 4. And even then you're getting probably the 4th best quarterback. And outside of that, it was like Darnold was pretty much the only option. So they made a lot of sense. And then you can read into Matt Rule is obviously a big fan of Sam Darnold. They have the connection with Robbie Anderson. I'm happy for Sam. I think he's going to get a fresh start in Carolina, and I think he'll be relatively good. I mean, maybe good's a bit of a stretch. I think he's going to be a solid NFL quarterback. I think he is a starter in this league, and I think he will be the quarterback of the Panthers for the foreseeable future. Excuse me. And they did end up picking up his 5th-year option, or the report is that they will. Which is a bit of a commitment. It does show that they are committing to Sam Darnold for at least the next 2 seasons. Michael, before I guess we talk about the Jets side of things, let's talk about the Sam Darnold side of things and I guess the Panthers side of things. How do you feel that the fit for Sam Darnold is? Do you think that his career can rebound? Because you're pretty low on him. Do you think you were just low on him because it made no sense for the Jets to bring him back? Or do you think that he really is not a good NFL quarterback or can't be a good NFL quarterback?
I think he definitely can be. I just think the main thing for me has been that this past season, I think too many people have sort of grouped this past season right in with his entire career story, when in reality, 2020 was nothing like 2018, 2019. The story people like to tell about Sam Darnold is the weapons, the coaching, the offensive line, all this stuff, which was all true. Just a terrible job. Very bad job by the Johnsons hiring Gase, by Mike McCagnon, the way he built around him, and then throw a little bit on Douglas too for not fully committing to helping him out in the 2020 offseason. But with all that being said, 2020 was not like 2018, 2019. Those 2 seasons, he was about 50-50 in terms of he would have some terrible games, but then he would have some games where he was really, really good, and you could see that potential. We saw it the last 4 games of 2018 and a few games at the beginning of that season, the season opener against Detroit, the Denver game, the Colts game. So he had, I would say, like 7 really good games as a rookie. Then you go to 2019, Cowboys game, fantastic. Then he has that 4-game stretch in terms of the stats. He had Giants, Washington, Raiders, 3 great games, but I thought he's great or very good against the Bengals too, even though his stats weren't good. Then he had a very good game against the Ravens on prime time. So that's maybe 6 good games that season. So, but then you go to this season and he didn't really have a single standout game the entire year.
Right.
Obviously, they beat the Browns and the Rams, but he wasn't very good in either of those games. And throughout the season, he just didn't have any good games. This season was a lot different than those first 2. Those flashes weren't there, and the support was arguably better, in my opinion. The offensive line was not as bad as the first 2 seasons. Denzel Mims brought an element they didn't really have the first 2 years either, and he was open plenty throughout the season. Darnold missed him a lot. So I think that's the biggest thing for me. This past season was not like the first 2. If Darnold played the way he did in 2018, 2019, when I was a huge fan of him after both of those seasons, then he would probably still be a Jet, and it would feel very good. There would be a good chance that he could turn it around, but this season was just extremely bad, regardless of the support or anything. So I think that's the biggest thing for me. I don't think enough people sort of give enough attention to how bad he was this season. And it was tough to watch because I had so much hope for him. I literally wrote 100 reasons to believe in him. So
Yeah,
it was
you can
tough to
forward that
watch. It was strange, but he was very bad. So that's the biggest thing. But can he turn it around? Of course he can. I think the question is, because I don't think he'll ever have a season as bad as 2020. That's almost guaranteed because he was that bad. But how good is he going to be? Is he going to be an upgrade over Teddy Bridgewater? Is he going to be more than Kirk Cousins? That's the question.
Right.
Because you want an elite quarterback in this league. If you're just getting a guy who needs, if your quarterback needs great surroundings to be good, then how much value is he actually adding to your team? You want your quarterback to lift the team up. You want to be able to win when your receivers are out. You want to be able to have a quarterback you can have for 5-10 years and you compete every single year, regardless of the quality of the rest of the team. If your quarterback needs a great offensive line, needs great receivers, needs a great coach, needs the perfect system to be great, then what is he actually bringing to your team? And that's the big question. I think that's why you move on from Darnold and try to get that guy with Zach Wilson or Justin Fields. So he'll definitely be better in Carolina. I think he'll put up pretty decent numbers this year, but will he turn out to be an answer for the Panthers? Will he become an elite quarterback in this league? I'm going to bet no, just based on the fact that quarterbacks who produce the way Darnold has through the first 3 seasons of their career, it's extremely low odds of success. There are some guys who figured it out, Alex Smith, Eli Manning,
Right.
Drew Brees. But those guys, for every one of those guys, there are about 10 failures who started the same way and didn't turn it around. So I don't think he'll be elite, but I do think he will figure out a way to have a long NFL. I think he'll have a Ryan Fitzpatrick sort of career. I think he'll last a long time and he's going to be very streaky. He's going to play for a lot of teams. He'll have some very good seasons here and there. And he'll just not be consistent enough to really stick as someone's franchise quarterback. So I think that's what he'll probably amount to be in the league. But is that potential there for him to be elite? I guess there probably is still a sliver of hope, but 38 starts in the books, over 1,200 passes, and we've only seen regression. The odds aren't looking good, but of course that possibility exists, and I think the Panthers are a good place. Joe Brady did a great job last year with Teddy Bridgewater, helped him have, I would say arguably his best season as a full-time starter. They've very good receiver trio with DJ Moore. Robbie Anderson had a breakout season last year, and Curtis Samuel went to Washington, but they do still have Robbie and DJ Moore, and McCaffrey's coming back, so they have a nice group of weapons.
Right.
They have some decent pieces on their O-line. It's a good place for him. So he'll definitely have a better shot than he did. At least the first 2 seasons. I'm still going to contend that 2020 he had, other than Adam Gase, is obviously a big detriment. In terms of players, I think it was decent enough for him to not be as bad as he was
Right.
this past season. But I'd say the Panthers are still probably a better situation than the 2020 team. But we'll see what happens. The biggest thing for me is how much is he going to lift his team up? Is he going to be a guy who just ebbs and flows with the quality of the team around him, or is he going to figure it out to the point where he's really an answer, really a guy who lifts the team up around him? Because that's what you want out of your quarterback.
Yeah, I'm excited to see him with Joe Brady. I do think that Brady is obviously an up and coming bright NFL offensive mind, a guy who interviewed for some head coaching gigs and will probably end up being a head coach in this league. Yeah, I will end up ultimately cheering for Sam Darnold. I mean, he's such a good guy and easy to root for. And it's sad.
Well, I mean, as a Jets fan, we have the
Oh,
Panthers
okay.
picks.
All right.
I
Well,
don't know if I'll be rooting for him.
I guess I'll be rooting for him individually, but I guess you're right. The team as a whole, we could use that second round pick to be, you know, maybe top 10 of the round, at least the top half of it. But going back to kind of what you said a little bit earlier about Adam Gase, there was a crux in his career between 2019 and 2020. In retrospect, that we believed at the end of 2019, okay, this is it. He's going to take the next step. And a lot of the reasons were, well, even though we don't love Adam Gase, and me and you kind of both knew he was a lame, everybody knew he was a lame duck head coach. There wasn't really many scenarios, or there weren't many scenarios where Gase was going to really turn it around and be the long-term head coach of the Jets and win Super Bowls here. We kind of already knew that, but in our breakdown of Sam Darnold and our breakdown of Gase, we said, well, we know this, that Darnold will, for the first time in his career, have a second year in the system. So presumably he's going to be a lot more comfortable with the offense, which we figured was maybe a big part of some of his failures in 2019 was he just wasn't comfortable. But now this offense is his. Gase talked about how Sam Darnold is making the offense his own. In retrospect, do you think that decision, and it's easier to say that the Jets should have fired Adam Gase after 2019. Do you think that was the wrong decision to bring back Adam Gase? And that sounds like a dumb question, but going back to the way we saw it last year, it was like, well, obviously we don't like Gase. We just want to cut ties with them. But they did finish 6-2. They finished 7-9. You don't have to pull the carpet under Darnold, and you give him another year in the same system. And we saw some promise towards the end of the year. Do you think that was ultimately the right thinking, or do you think that the Jets should have recognized that, look, this Adam Gase system, no matter how many times he can say that Sam Darnold's making his own, it just didn't fit Sam Darnold's strengths. I mean, we just know it. I mean, it was a system built for Peyton Manning, essentially, and that's just not who Darnold is. Even if Darnold hits his elite ceiling, he's never going to be Peyton Manning. That's just, he's a backyard football quarterback, and that was the antithesis of what Adam Gase's offense was. So looking back, do you think that the Jets ultimately hurt Sam Darnold's career? Because we were talking about, well, there's the COVID offseason, and look at a guy like Baker Mayfield. He's not going to have much time to learn the whole offseason. He's going to go right into the regular season, no preseason. But it turned out really well for Baker. He had a much better year than 2019, and it turned out to be the right decision. Do you think that's ultimately what doomed Sam Darnold with the Jets, was the decision to bring back Adam Gase?
Well, you let me know what you think. I'll give my opinion, but it is, I think, hindsighted to look back on it in that way, because for the most part, I think we all agreed, 6-2 finish. He showed progress in the second half of the season. Let's value continuity. But I guess in hindsight, continuity with a bad thing isn't really something you want. I think that even though the 6-2, one of the biggest things about that 2019 season is that the 6-2 finish was something they shouldn't have. It's not something you want to put too much confidence in, because it was one of the worst 6-2 finishes you could have. They beat the Giants, not a good team. Raiders, not a good team. Washington, not a good team. Steelers were a 500 team with two very bad quarterbacks, and the Bills were resting their starters, and they barely won most of those games. And they also
and the defense won.
Lost to the winless Bengals. And the defense won most of those games, and the offense was still bad. So I don't think there was really, in terms of the offense, any progress to look at. That was Greg Williams' defense for the most part, carrying those games. And in the games where Darnold did play well, a lot of it, like the Ravens game, that wasn't schemed up good offense. That was Darnold being ridiculous. And a few of those other games as well. So it's hindsight, because I don't think I thought this at the time. I was definitely on the train of valuing the continuity, but in retrospect, they really should have fired him after they started 1-7 that season, after they lost to the winless Dolphins. But It's hindsighted, but I
Right.
think that now that it's all said and done, that it probably would have been best to just, even though it was a COVID offseason, even though it would be his third coach, that just, he's Adam Gase, just get him out. Two straight, even though you have continuity, it's not good to have
Right.
continuity with something that's bad.
Yeah, I think there's two trains of thought. And the one, which is clearly the one that the Jets chose, is in order to have success in the NFL, you have to be patient. You have to have a plan and stick to it and try to build, because the last 10 years, the way the Jets have operated, really before Joe Douglas, it was kind of like they were just driving with the blindfold on. They didn't really ever have a succinct plan. They weren't drafting players to come into an organization that had a specific plan for them. When they would come to the draft and free agency, they were just trying to add either the best player on their board or the flashy offensive skill positions or big money signings and stuff like that. And in order to become a great team, you have to become a good team first. I mean, that's why Joe Douglas is emphasizing the importance of building the offensive line, because, you take a team with a good offensive line and let's just say everything else is bad. They're still going to win some games. They're still going to be a solid team, but you have a team that has a terrible offensive line, and then you go and sign a Le'Veon Bell, or you go and bring in a big money wide receiver or something, you're not going to get success. And so the Jets under Douglas, I like that they have a plan, that they're following it, that they're drafting players with a role in mind, that they're drafting not only the best player available, but the best player for the New York Jets. If the Jets are picking at 23, if a safety is the best player on their board, it doesn't make any sense to take a safety. They should look at offensive linemen that fit John Benton's scheme. They should look at corners that fit Robert Saleh's defense and Jeff Ulbricht's defense. And that's the way they were building it. And that's only recently. So I think when you go back to that decision, they were under the mindset of, let's build with continuity. Let's not rip the carpet under from Darnold. We like the progress that he's shown. Let's just give him another season with the same offense. So he's not, spending the entire offseason trying to study it. Instead, he's spending the entire offseason just getting even more comfortable with it and building it up. And I agree with you. I think in retrospect, it really did hurt him, because I think it forced him to develop some scars. I think that's going to be the most interesting thing about his time in Carolina, is how much can Joe Brady just erase his memory and get him back to that guy coming out of USC. I mean, that's going to be Joe Brady's number one task. Is he's going to have to sit down with them and say, forget everything you've learned. Because we saw it building with Adam Gase and having that continuity, it didn't help anything. I mean, he developed a lot of bad habits. He was scared. His play clock was rattled. He lost a lot of the things that made him special in 2018. So it's tough. I feel bad for Sam. And of course, the Jets are in this position yet again, where they're trying to draft the replacement for Joe Namath. And by the way, I mean, kind of, ignoring Ken O'Brien and Chad Pennington and maybe Mark Sanchez for 2 years there. I mean, they've had some good quarterback seasons, but here we are again looking for the franchise savior. I feel bad for Darnold, but ultimately, this was definitely the right decision. And when you look at the Jet side of things, Michael, I mean, you talked about how they got a lot more value than you thought they would, but I guess can you just speak to maybe the process to getting here? I mean, I think we all thought at the beginning of the season, okay, maybe they can get a 2 for him. And then in the last few weeks, it seems like, okay, maybe they'll get a 3 for him. But a 6, a 2, and a 4, I feel like that's a really good haul for this team. It's the quantity over quality, but even they're getting good quality in those second and fourth round draft picks, particularly the second round draft pick. And now the Jets are set up with even more ammo. How do you feel about this team moving forward and using all these picks? Because obviously, I mean, it's a cliche, but you have to hit on these picks. But the Jets have really set themselves up to be in a nice situation with a QB on a rookie contract and all these picks and even cap space to build around him. So I guess from the Jets perspective, can you just talk me through how you're feeling?
I mean, I think in terms of the package, it really just seems like Carolina was really high on him. They were apparently talking about it for. I think the report was that after the Ohio State Pro Day is when the talk sort of started. So, which plays right into what we heard, that the Jets were going to go through their process before accelerating the Darnold trade. So it seems like once they were sold on Wilson and Fields, from seeing them in person, that's when they decided to go through with it. But it really just seems like the Panthers have a lot of faith in him. The fact that I'm very surprised that they're accepting his 5th-year option. I didn't think whoever, and that was what was interesting about trying to find a landing spot, was that it didn't seem like any team was going to want to commit themselves to that almost $19 million guaranteed in 2022 for a guy who probably wouldn't be starting for you and just is coming off of a really bad season last year. But it seems like they're all in on him. They're going to try to move Bridgewater. And if they can, Darnold's probably going to start anyway, because they might also restructure his deal if they can't move him. So it seems like they're all in on Darnold, which is an interesting move for sure. It'll definitely be one of the more intriguing storylines in the league, especially from our perspective. But I think it'll be really interesting to see how the Panthers change his play style, or how his play style develops over there, because one of the most notable things about his decline this year is that his issues, a lot of the same issues expanded from the previous years, but there are also new problems that he didn't have the past few years. When we were talking about him after 2019, we did a few film breakdown episodes. One of the main themes was that he was consistently too aggressive. He wouldn't check the ball down quick enough. He'd be too late to get to his check down. He would try and like the most aggressive option available when there was something easier available underneath, things like that. But in 2020, it really kind of developed to the opposite. A lot of the time, he was taking the safer option when there was something really good available down the field. There's a play against the Rams where Denzel Mims went uncovered on a go route. There's space between the deep safety and the corner and the flat, and Darnold decides to scramble instead. There's a play against the Browns where it was a high-low read on a rollout. Mims was wide open, about 15 yards down the field. Crowder was covered in the flat, about 8 yards downfield. He throws to Crowder. Things like that were not mistakes he would make in his first 2 years. He was a very aggressive quarterback, one of the most aggressive quarterbacks in the league. And then in 2020, his main problem becomes that he's a game manager. So it will be interesting to see how the Panthers try to get him back to that aggressive play style, but B, he still has to master that aspect of it, because even though he was aggressive his first years, he still wasn't necessarily good at that yet, because he still had to control it and harness it to the point where he's not turning the ball over as much, to where he's checking the ball down where he needs to check it down instead of taking a low percentage shot downfield. So it's going to be a process with him. You want to get him back to being the style player that he was, but even once you do that, he still has work to do from that point, because he wasn't a finished product yet the first 2 years, even though he was a lot better and a lot more promising than this past season. So it seems like the Panthers are really high on him. Will be interesting to see how they mold Darnold and try to get him to be their franchise quarterback.
I'm curious to see how much better than Teddy Bridgewater he's going to be. I mean, clearly based off 2020, and you said it earlier, I don't think that the quarterback we saw in 2020 is who Sam Darnold is. I do believe that he battled through more injuries, maybe more than we knew. I think that the scars were certainly evident. So I think some of those you can teach away, and that's going to come down to Joe Brady and Matt Rule. I think the scheme will probably fit him better. He's going to be surrounded by more talent. But at the end of the day, kind of like you said, for him to even hit the level of being a top 15 quarterback, compared on based off his first 3 seasons, would have to be pretty astronomical. Maybe not astronomical, but it would have to be a pretty big leap for him. And even if he can hit it, I mean, yeah, how much better than Teddy Bridgewater can he be? How can he be worth the $20 million that he's going to cost him in 2022? I mean, that's what's interesting to me. And the fact that they're picking up his 5th-year option, they're basically saying that he is going to be their quarterback for the next 2 years. So if he is absolutely terrible next year, they're in a really tough spot if they pick up that 5th-year option. I think before, when he was coming out, the player that I compared him to, not necessarily as a play style, but just the type of quarterback I saw him being, was an Eli Manning, and remove the Super Bowls from this equation. But just kind of that mid-level guy who can get streaky, kind of like you were saying with Fitzpatrick, can get hot and put together stretches of games. But at the end of the day, he can be fairly inconsistent. He's going to turn the ball over. He's never going to be truly elite. I'm fascinated to see the type of career that he's going to have post Adam Gase and post Jets. I do think you're going to see him return more to that 2018, 2019 Darnold. The question is how much better can he get? And is he going to be worth the money? Now, when we look at what the Jets are going to do it to, now there's no question about it. The Jets are going to make the right decision, that trading Darnold, resetting on the rookie contract, fresh start. You have a new coach. Don't hold on to, it wasn't even Joe Douglas's quarterback. It was Mike McCagney's quarterback. So now you're fully in the Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh vision. You're picking at 2. Obviously we have the next few weeks to discuss this, but you're it seems like you're kind of on the fence with Fields and Wilson, that you don't really have a guy. And we talked about this in the podcast. That'll come out later this week, but your gut feeling, I mean, who do you think is Sam Darnold's replacement, and who do you think Joe Douglas will tab to be the Jets franchise quarterback?
Well, I definitely think it's going to be Wilson. That seems like what all signs are pointing to, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I think that I agree with that. Even though me and you both kind of think that Fields should not be discounted in that equation.
Yeah, I think the biggest sign for Fields is I think the culture aspect of it. I could really see in terms of building the Robert Saleh identity. I think Fields is sort of a better fit for that. Not that Wilson isn't a good fit for it too, but I just think Fields is better in terms of just the big game mentality, the leadership stuff, all that intangible stuff. I feel like Fields sort of has the edge. They're both pretty good in that area, but it does seem like Wilson is going to be their guy, and that they're not necessarily not that Fields couldn't. I feel like he can run almost any kind of offense in the league. I don't think he's necessarily tethered to being an RPO sort of quarterback. This guy can play quarterback. He can make I'm going to use the stupid phrase that everyone uses. He can make all the throws. He can work from the pocket. He's not a guy who just runs around with the ball. He's a great quarterback. I think he could fit anywhere, honestly. Obviously, you want to put him in a system where you emphasize the special things he can do as a runner, but I think he can fit anywhere if any team wanted him. But with that being said, I think Wilson is probably more so what they're looking for, because I don't think they are really going to want to commit to building that kind of offense around Fields. I don't necessarily think that's what LaFleur is looking to do. So Wilson's probably a better fit for running sort of what the Niners ran, and a combination of not just that, also what you see with his brother in Green Bay. So sort of both of those philosophies. So will be interesting to see how much of the Shanahan offense with the Niners and then also the Matt LaFleur offense with the Packers. And between those two things, it seems like Wilson is the better fit, but I wouldn't rule out Fields. These two guys are both so great. And even though we've seen a few reports going that way, for the most part, we know that Joe Douglas has kept the ship very tight and covered throughout his tenure here. It's been hard to get any leaks out of them. So even though we've seen a few, and that it is the smartest bet to go with those, I wouldn't lock it down just yet. And remember the 2018 draft when Darnold was a Cleveland Brown for 4.5 or 3.5 months. And then the last second, Baker Mayfield is the guy. Darnold's a Jet. So
yeah, you saying that's going to happen with Trevor Lawrence?
That would be so. How about that? Imagine that happened.
I wouldn't rule it. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, but I'd say that there's a 1% chance, maybe. I mean, the Zach Wilson.
Is there a 1% chance? Because I feel like Urban Meyer's sort of talking about him like he's his quarterback already.
I guess I would say that there are people who have Wilson above Lawrence. I mean, look at Chris Sims, but I think you're right. I think Lawrence is going to go number one. I think the point you raised about Douglas keeping the ship tight is an important one, because we really don't have any idea who the Jets are going to take. We said this and the podcast hasn't come out yet, but I mentioned that it wouldn't completely, utterly out of this world shock me if the Jets took Trey Lance. And you're like, well, that would be pretty shocking. And it would be surprising, but we really don't know who their preference is. I kind of get what you're saying. I do feel like Fields could come into an NFL locker room, at least at the start. And I feel like he could relate better to the locker room. I feel like he probably is probably the natural or the better natural leader at this point. But Zach Wilson is just so talented, and you have to remember to evaluate outside of the weaker competition and just look at the player that you're watching. And when you watch him, you do see Mahomes, you do see Kyler Murray, you do see Josh Allen, you do see that new age quarterback. And but I think the overall point I have here is that I trust Joe Douglas. I feel like, he hasn't made every move correctly, but I feel like overall he's the best GM the Jets have had in a long time. I feel like he has a plan. He's certainly in that Ozzie Newsome mold, and I fully trust the decision that he's going to make here. Look, this is an amazing quarterback class. There's a very good chance that 4 quarterbacks are going to go to start the entire draft. And so it's a perfect position for the Jets. And they should end up getting a winner with this pick. I guess, Michael, to close this, because we're probably not going to talk too much about Sam Darnold after this episode, I want your favorite underrated Sam Darnold moment of his entire career.
Well, I definitely know some underrated games. I mentioned the Bengals game.
Okay, but
Ravens
that's not
game.
your favorite. I want your
Okay,
favorite.
I'm
moment
making up
that's
my own
not-
question. I'm making up my own question because I didn't have an answer to yours.
Thanks.
Underrated moment. All right. Do you have one? Because you came up with this question. How about you mention yours? I'll try to think of
No,
one.
generally what happens is I just think of these questions on the fly and then you answer them and I think of my answer.
Oh,
But
so it's actually the other way around. But I'm
yeah,
turning it back on you.
yeah. I mean, look, I think the Texans game probably. I would say the Texans
But
game
you
is
said no games. You said moment.
Oh, well, a moment is okay, fine.
I
You want
said
one
the
moment?
game, and then you
All right,
told me I
all
was
right, all
okay.
right. All right, simmer down. Probably his touchdown 2019 in Baltimore to Jameson Crowder. That to me, I mean, like the obvious one is the Robbie Anderson bomb against Dallas, but the throw he made against Jameson Crowder really had me optimistic for the season that he was going to have in 2020. Obviously, it didn't pan out, but I mean, that's the story of Darnold's career. Is he's just had so many of those wow moments, and then so many of those oh my god, he's terrible moments, and just nothing really in between. It's just so erratic. And so I think that does give Carolina hope that they can be the ones to get that consistency out of him. But obviously in 2020 we saw more oh my god, he terrible moments than wow. But yeah, as far as my favorite moment, or I guess I guess we can boil it down to play. I would say the throw he made to Jamison Crowder in the back corner of the end zone against Baltimore. I thought that was just a perfect example of the type of player he is. I mean, he's had a lot of those throws. The one against San Francisco and Indianapolis this year. He had the play against Oakland in 2019. A lot of those kind of backyard football, insanely accurate throws. But that one against Baltimore to me was like, all right, this guy's legit. He can play on prime time on the road against a perennial winner. And play like an NFL quarterback. Unfortunately, that was probably the last good game in my eyes that he really had. So, it's a sad story for Darnold, but look, in the end, he's going to make a boatload of money. He's going to have another job, even if he fails in Carolina. And I do think he's going to have a solid career in Carolina. And it's the best case scenario for him because I think it's a lot easier for him to clean up a lot of those scars in a new place, get that fresh start than it would be to come into New York where, look, there's going to be fans this year. They're going to be booing him the first interception he throws. It's just going to be hard for him to get through a lot of those mental barriers, I think, that we saw. Go to Carolina, a smaller market, a great offensive mind in Joe Brady and a great team. And I think you're going to see a really good quarterback come out of there. But yeah, favorite moment, Baltimore to Jameson Crowder.
I do have some underrated moments. A lot of them are from 2018.
Okay.
That Patriots game in Week 17, I think he was pretty good. He didn't put up any stats. He even put up like the same stats as Bryce Petty did the year before, but he was way better. He had a great throw to Chris Herndon in the end zone that was dropped. He had a great deep ball Trenton Cannon that was dropped.
Deontay Burnett.
Yeah, he had a few dimes to Deontay Burnett in that game.
Legend.
And just not underrated, but the Robbie Anderson touchdown against the Cowboys, that was one of my peak Jets fan moments. That was absolutely
how sad
amazing.
is that? That's one of the peaks.
Yes, that was great.
That was great, but fun. We were like 0-5.
That's why it was fun, because it was like wiping away everything we had dealt with the first four games of the season. So that was a great moment too. So I thank him for that.
Well, folks, I think we're done here with the emergency.
Wait, I have one more question. I want to know your opinion on this. So the Jets tweeted out, they had a tweet with a picture that says, "Thank you, Sam." Do you think he is, or thank you for everything, Sam? Do you think he is deserving of that?
Yeah, I think you could amend that tweet. I think he is deserving of the tweet because the subtext there is "Thank you for everything you put up with, Sam," is the real tweet there. I mean, look, Joe Douglas promised his parents that he was going to surround Sam with talent and playmakers, and obviously that wasn't really in the cards for 2020. I think he probably planned to build upon it in 2021, but he put up with a lot of shit with this organization, and as I said, it's a win-win-win. I would feel worse about trading away Sam if I honestly didn't think this was the best thing that could happen for him. I mean, I really do think going to Carolina is going to be a lifesaver for his career. Even if he goes to Carolina and has success, and the Jets draft a quarterback, and let's be positive. Let's say they both have success. Some people are going to say, well, why didn't the Jets just stick with Sam Darnold? They could have traded back and built around him even more. But the thought process behind obviously the rookie contract and all the things we already talked about. But I just believe that Sam Darnold probably wasn't going to figure it out in New York. I just think it's a tough market. I think the scars are there. I think the only way that he's going to be a successful NFL quarterback is with a completely clean slate. So I think that tweet's necessary. I mean, look, he was the guy that was promised as the savior of the franchise, and the franchise really let him down.
And he wasn't.
Yeah, but I would say the franchise let him down. I would say the franchise let him down more than he let us out.
I know he's a fantastic guy, has never said a mean thing in his life, was fantastic here with the media. I know he worked very hard, all that great stuff. But at the end of the day, this guy had the worst passer rating in the NFL last season. He never had 20 touchdown passes in a season. I don't think that a guy who was the worst player at his position last year deserves a thank you tweet. I honestly just don't think that he does.
You're a cold, heartless bastard, Michael. I mean,
I don't think he does.
you wouldn't.
What are we thanking him for? 13 wins in 3 seasons.
It's not for what he did. It's for what he had to put up with. That's what you're thanking him for.
So why don't we thank Joe Flacco too? He had to put up with it.
No. It's different. He was the young prodigy. He was the young prodigy that came to save us, and we failed him more than he failed us. Let's be honest here. I mean, I agree that he didn't live up to his billing. I think that he was, in retrospect, not as good of a prospect as we thought he was, not as good as a quarterback as we thought he was. But at the end of the day, the Jets failed him. I mean, let's be honest here. And
I still agree. But
you wouldn't have tweeted anything?
I wouldn't. No.
Well, I mean, I guess we're just different there.
I would just tweet that the trade happened and just move on from it.
I think you deserve a thank you. I mean, they're not taking out a full page ad in the New York Times. I mean, they're just tweeting.
I don't know. I think they will.
Yeah, maybe. Well, that's going to do it for us. As I mentioned, we're going to have another podcast coming out this week. This is going to come out Tuesday. So
hold on. Before we finish, I just have to say, I don't want to seem too anti-Darnold. I just don't think
that ship sailed like 7 months ago.
I just don't think that a thank you tweet is warranted. That's all. Like, he's a great guy.
That's your parting shot to Sam Darnold.
Best of luck.
He doesn't even deserve a thank you.
I don't think the thank you tweet.
Would you have tweeted out maybe we're sorry? Maybe that would be better than thank you.
Maybe that would be better. Yeah, I guess. We're sorry, Sam. We have to check on other teams who have gotten rid of quarterbacks who weren't good. Who's an example of
Mitch Trubisky?
Like, did the Bears give him a thank you tweet?
I think so.
He won. He actually got to the playoffs.
Thank you, Mitch. Bears Twitter. Nothing comes up here. This is. Yeah, he did. Oh no, never mind. This is not an official Bears. Yeah. Okay, never mind. I don't think he did.
Oh no, he didn't. I'm seeing people complain about him not getting one. See, he was more productive than Darnold was.
Yeah, okay.
Got him to the playoffs.
Hater. Well, let's just hope the Jets don't repeat the same mistake. I mean, I really don't think they will. I think the Jets are in a fantastic position here.
Let's just hope in the future we don't need to give thank you tweets to quarterbacks who win an average of 4 games a year.
Oh my God. I can't wait till this team is good, because the losing Jets version of Michael Nania is hard. I mean, you're a realist, so I mean, I guess
we haven't seen any other versions.
I guess that's true. I didn't know you when the Jets were good at all, not even 2015. So I'm excited. I think this year they're going to be okay, and then I think the year after that they're going to be a good football team. So only 2 more years, and then we'll be in that position where I can see positive Michael Nania tweets all the time. But that's going to do it for us. You can follow us at TYJ Pod on Twitter. You can follow myself, Ben W. Blessington, Michael _Nania. You can find this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Jets X Factor, the best place to go for Jets content. I guess let's just hope the Jets don't make this mistake again. I mean, they're in a position with a young quarterback again, probably Zach Wilson. The ship has been tight with Douglas, but considering Todd McShay and Daniel Jeremiah are acting like it's a shoe-in, and those are too close, I don't want to say confidants, but maybe guys who are very experienced with Joe Douglas and former scouts. I would imagine Wilson's probably going to be the guy. So they have an opportunity to really turn it around, and we'll see if they can. I feel bad for Sam. I feel bad for the way this whole situation turned out, but I think it's best for all parties. And like you said, Sam does deserve to shoulder some blame, because this year he was pretty underwhelming. Michael, any last words before we get out of here? And I think this may be the last, I mean, not the last time, but we're not really going to talk about Sam Darnold anymore, considering this podcast was pretty much built on the back of talking about Sam Darnold, the 100 reasons why to believe in Sam Darnold, looking at Sam Darnold film. And I mean, it's a new era for the Cool Your Jets podcast. So any last wisdom about Sam Darnold? Maybe you can rattle off 100 reasons not to believe in him, and I can
I'm
time you.
honestly pretty relieved that this is over, which is no disrespect to him, but it just got to the point with this season that it just wasn't really fun because it's just a lot of animosity with the debates about him, and it's so hard to see him. It's just hard to project him being good because of it's just all hope. So that was the hardest thing. Like you just hope and hope and hope, and it just never really came. And it still could in Carolina or maybe even elsewhere, but it was getting tiresome so just to start clean and have to start this over with, and hopefully with better support than Darnold got, because the Jets did. And that's the biggest takeaway from this whole thing is don't make your first pick after trading up to select a quarterback, Nathan Shepard. That's not how you build around your quarterback. Don't not select any offensive linemen. Don't not sign any wide receivers. Don't draft Darius Stewart and Chad Hansen.
Yeah,
Do better. That you got to do better than that. So that's the biggest lesson from all this. Do a better job of building around your franchise quarterback. At the same time, if Darnold were as special as the Jets, at least to this point, as special as Jets hoped for him to be, then he wouldn't have been as bad as he was this past season. He would have been competent like the first two seasons. But so he does deserve a pretty decent share of the blame for 2020. But for the most part, this is all a product of bad hires, bad drafting, neglecting important positions around the quarterback, and that can't happen. And it's not happening. The Jets are already doing a great job of reversing that. They last drafts in 2020 already put more picks or more points on the draft trade chart into O-line and wide receiver than Maccagnan did his entire tenure, just with Becton and Denzel Mims. They signed Corey Davis. They signed George Fant last year. Obviously, O-line didn't go too well in free agency this year.
It's a hell of an O-line draft, though.
But it's a great O-line class, and they'll have their chances. So they're already reversing their woes of last season. And Michael Floor is much better of an offensive coordinator than
we
Jeremy
hope.
Bates or Adam Gase. We hope. But definitely brings a more modern pedigree than the mountain climber and the guy who was smelling salt in the preseason.
Yeah.
So the Jets are already doing a great job of reversing all the mistakes they made with Sam Darnold. So those would be my biggest takeaways with Sam Darnold. Take seriously building around your quarterback, A, and B, look, I think Sam Darnold, he's a great guy, but let's put some blame on him for 2020. He made a lot of mistakes that were on him and cannot be blamed to anyone else. But good luck. Good luck.
But
good luck in Carolina. But not too much, because we have your team's draft pick.
Yeah.
So I hope
you know what underrated thing I'm excited about with this news officially being done is that the Jets next year will have a quarterback who doesn't wear long sleeve jerseys. I think it's honestly a terrible look. So I'm excited to watch the tight fitting jersey, and maybe a single digit number 2, which I think looks better in these unis. These are the things that really matter as a Jets fan. These are the things you really have to.
Zach Wilson has worn long sleeves in some.
No, not the undershirt, the jersey itself. You know what I'm talking about? Darnold had like the baggy jerseys like Eli Manning used to wear.
Oh yeah.
It always bothered me. I think in these news jerseys it just doesn't look as good because the shoulder stripe gets all like wiggly. Like it just doesn't look right. Like you look like Braxton Berrios' jersey. It's always tight and like the shoulder stripe really comes together. It looks like an airplane. These are the things that really matter.
Also, we could be seeing single digit numbers at other positions as well. There's that big news.
Yeah, I know.
Are you a supporter of that?
I'm definitely a supporter of that. It's going to be weird for the first few years, but why not? I mean, it's such a dumb rule. I think it's because like the refs need to identify, want to make it easier for the refs.
I mean, I'm kind of used to it in the NFL. Like it kind of helps you identify like who's who, like especially on defense. Like you want to see, is that a linebacker or cornerback? But you can tell by the body type, I guess. And we're already in college football. It's always been that way. So it'll take some getting used to, but there will be some really cool looks. And it'll also bring a lot more variability to positions, because with how limited the selection is, like you have a lot of star players at the same position who have the same number. Like how many not that quarterback is changing, but just as an example, there's so many number 12s at quarterback. And then you look at receiver, there are so many, number 15s and 17s. So this should,
now we're going to
give guys some more individuality.
All right. I agree with that. The other thing with the unis is this is going to be the first year where hopefully, where they're actually the uniforms that we thought they were going to be, because this year it's
like actually in pure form. You had the 100 logo in 2019. You had the patch last year. So hopefully we get the actual
This is so depressing
this year.
This is so sad. These are the things we really care about. But oh boy. Well, the Adam Gase era is officially over. The Mike McCagnon era is officially over.
Actually, I don't think we're going to be getting the real uniforms because they're going to have to put a patch on it to honor Sam Darnold.
All right.
And his 13 wins.
Oh boy, the Adam Gase over. The Adam Gase era is over. The Mike McCagnon era is over. The Sam Darnold era is over. It's officially Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh time. No excuses. 21 draft picks over the next 2 years. An exciting time to be a Jets fan. I think I'm going to say that maybe 17,000 times before the start of the season, but I'm looking forward to it.
You said it both of the last 2 seasons also, or 3.
Okay, but I mean it this time. I say a lot of shit I don't mean, but this one I actually mean. It's an exciting time. 3 more weeks and we'll officially know who Sam Darnold's replacement is, but oh boy, here we go again. Another franchise savior. Thank you for listening, folks. And as always, don't let the Jets ruin your life.
Carr has to work quickly. Down to 6 seconds. Carr going down again. And it's Quentin Williams this time for the Jets.
For the middle in the air, picked off. Brian Poole to the end zone, touchdown. Hunter to beat, and the punter brings him down. Braden Mann saved a touchdown, most likely.
Looks right, fires a bomb down the right sideline again for Mims. What a catch by Denzel Mims.